Product provided by Nintendo, specifically Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. On June 10th of 2010, Xenoblade Chronicles would come into the world. It's been 15 years of my favorite IP in all of gaming. 15 years of incredible stories, amazing characters, and breathtaking worlds that have captivated the hearts and minds of so many people and continue to do so. These are games I'm going to revisit countless times in the future. And in honor of the 15-year anniversary of Xenoblade Chronicles, I think it's only right to take this series' message to heart and look to the future. What do I think awaits us in the future? I have a rough timeline and a couple predictions as to what we'll see. So let's get right on into this. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls. Okay, you're going to want to listen up because we are at a crossroads for Xenoblade Chronicles. It's arguably the most pivotal and interesting point in all of Xenoblade. The Klaus saga is done, and with the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, they have fully put all the pieces on the proverbial game board for the future of Xenoblade, narratively speaking. However, on top of that, we have a new piece of hardware from Nintendo, the Nintendo Switch 2. So not only are we at the start of something new and possibly special for Xenoblade when it comes to the story and what's going on in the game, but also, Monolith now have more power than ever to work with. And I think one of the best things that we can do to ascertain what could possibly come in the future is to look at what came before, to see what patterns could possibly emerge that we can glean and learn from and apply for the future of Xenoblade. Well, let's start all the way back in the year 2010. 25 years ago, Xenoblade Chronicles released in Japan and eventually would find its way to North America on April 6th, 2012. Cut forward a couple of years, and in the year 2015, on April 2nd, the 3DS version of Xenoblade Chronicles would release in Japan. Cut forward a couple of years, and on April 2nd, 2015, in Japan, the 3DS version of Xenoblade Chronicles would release. Pretty big month for Xenoblade because also, on April 29th of 2015, in Japan, Xenoblade Chronicles X would come out. And then later that year, on December 4th, we would get the NA and the EU versions for that. And then, the Nintendo Switch would come out. And on December 1st, 2017, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 would come out. Next year, on September 14th, 2018, Torn of the Golden Country. Fast forward a little bit to May 29th, 2020, and we would get Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition. And then something interesting would happen. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 would release ahead of schedule, releasing on July 29th, 2022, with the next calendar year bringing us Future Redeemed on April 25th, 2023. And then, only a couple months back, on March 20th, 2025, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition would release. And now we're here, looking into the future. 3 numbered games. A game once thought to be a spin-off, now firmly cemented as one of the 4 pillars of Xenoblade up to this point in time. We look to the future and wonder, where do we go from here? Well, before we actually talk timetables here, let's talk about what I think we're going to see. I think the next big entry for Xenoblade is going to be Xenoblade Chronicles 4. It might not be called that. They could count Xenoblade Chronicles X as essentially 4 if they want to, and just skip to Xenoblade Chronicles 5, they could call it Xenoblade Saga. I think the safest bet is Xenoblade Chronicles 4, because having a game with 4 in it would be the best for marketing and not to confuse people. If you would just jump ahead to 5, people would unironically think, well, where's 4? Though I wouldn't be surprised if they call it Xenoblade Saga, considering just how much they are bringing Saga into the story. And as someone who's gone back to play Xenosaga, and I'm still working my way through episode 1, yeah, it's abundantly apparent to me they want Saga to be essentially viewed as canon. Just way too much fits, but that's a story for another time. Then I think going off the pattern we have established now since Xenoblade Chronicles 2, anywhere from less than a year to about a year after the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 4, I think we'll see a DLC, or a big narrative expansion to Xenoblade 4. If history is anything to go by, then it might be a prequel, considering that Future Redeemed and Torna were mostly prequels. But considering this is an entire new era for the story of Xenoblade, who knows what they're going to do with these locations and these characters, it very well could be a sequel follow-up. But I don't think Xenoblade 4 having a DLC or a new expansion story is anything particularly surprising or noteworthy, right? What I think comes afterwards is the big one. Because normally what Xenoblade has done, if you look at the release order, between every numbered game, there's 2 other things. In between 1 and 2, we had the 3DS port and also X. In between 2 and 3, we had Torn of the Golden Country and Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition. Assuming 4 is up next, we've already had 2 things between 3 and 4, with Future Redeemed and now Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. So assuming before this theoretical Xenoblade Chronicles 5, which I also think would be on the Switch too, we are due for one other thing between Xenoblade 4 and 5. I think that will be another definitive edition for 2. At least last I checked, Xenoblade 2 is still the version of Xenoblade that has sold the most. As a singular copy, as a singular entity, Xenoblade 2 leads the pack. And considering we have gotten definitive editions of way less popular in terms of sales figures Xenoblade games, it only makes sense to me that they would revisit the game that has done the most for the recognition and the sales figures of Xenoblade and go back to 2. A game that, at least at this, theoretical release time for Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition would be well over 10 years old. Xenoblade 2 also consists of a lot of extremely polarizing elements, whether that be field skills, the gacha system, the overall resolution, the frame rate, the missions you send your blades out on, the freaking Ursula quest, poor tutorialization, and there is a lot that can be altered and changed with a definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to make it more appealing, to smooth out a lot of those rough edges, and to allow the great qualities of Xenoblade 2 to shine. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and this isn't just coming from a place of love for me when it comes to the game. I think it just makes the most sense, because it's also, at this point in time, arguably the most deeply flawed of all the Xenoblade games. There are a lot of elements in this game that are massively off-putting for a lot of people. Now, I'm able to enjoy the game because the pros wildly outweigh the cons for me, but if you're Monolith, and you have the opportunity to revisit your most popular game on newer, better hardware, all the while being able to market, once again, extremely marketable characters and also known characters at this point because of Smash Brothers, and also just the popularity of Xenoblade 2 overall, it just makes a lot of business sense to me as to why Monolith and Nintendo would go for this. I think by the time we actually get to a theoretical Xenoblade 6, the Switch 2's life cycle would probably be near its end, but maybe after they do Xenoblade 6 and a Xenoblade 6 DLC, they could do a Xenoblade 3 Definitive Edition, because again, it would be a long bit of time between the actual release of 3 and that theoretical point in time. But I think the Switch 2 era for Xenoblade has a lot of potential to really put the series on the map and to hone this series into the juggernaut that I fully believe that it can be. I don't want to get too hung up on the numbers because this is massively subject to change and there hasn't been a consistent, specific release schedule for Xenoblade at any point here, so we can only really make back-of-the-napkin estimates when it comes to a bunch of this stuff. But let's see what we can do here. Between the Japanese release of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that was a difference of 7 years and 5 months, or 2,731 days, at least to the online calculator that I used for this. And between the release of Xenoblade 2 and 3, that was only a difference of 1,701 days, over 1,000 days quicker, coming in at only 4 years, 7 months, and 28 days. And considering the release date of Xenoblade 1 was staggered across various regions, and was also the, conception of this entire series, I think it's safe to utilize more recent data into the times figures we have between Xenoblade 1 and 2. So if we simply add the difference in time between the release of Xenoblade 2 and 3, that 4 years, 7 months, and 28 days figure, using the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 as the start point, we get somewhere around March 26, 2027. Bearing in mind, though, that 3 was released early, so give or take a couple of months. And if we use that date to calculate the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles 5, then that takes us to late November 2031. Specifically November 23, 2031, but let's not get hung up on the exact day here, right? Massively subject to change. Like I said, this is mostly just for ballpark estimates. Don't get bogged down in the exact details. So essentially, Xenoblade 5, late 2031, Xenoblade 4, spring 2027. There is a different way we can get to the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles 4, however. That is, instead of using the difference between Xenoblade 2 and 3 to calculate the time, we go from the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition to 3, which was only 791 days or 2 years and 2 months. And if we do that from the release of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, we land on May 20th, 2027, so also a spring 2027 release. So I think unless stuff just massively changes, I think spring 2027 is a decent pick for when to expect Xenoblade Chronicles 4. Now, they could be faster than this for whatever reason. Maybe a lot of the back-end work they did for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition or 3 is able to expedite things along. Maybe because it's all new hardware, they need a bit of extra time. But just to get a general notion as to when to maybe expect Xenoblade 4, I think spring 2027 is a decent pick for this. And there's only a 270-day difference between the release of Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed, so like, if you want another DLC, just add that on. However, the big one, for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Definitive Edition, if we want just some back-of-the-napkin math for this, between the release of 3 and Future Redeemed, that was 270 days. Between the release of Future Redeemed and X Definitive Edition, that was 695 days. Add that up, and you get 965 days. Add that onto the theoretical release of Xenoblade Chronicles 4, and you get late 2029, specifically November 15th, 2029, if you use that March 26th date from before. But if you use the May 20th date for Xenoblade 4, and you add 965 days onto that, you get January 9th, 2030. So like, either very early 2030 or late 2029. These dates make a lot of sense to me, because we're just following the pattern of what Monolith have already done, or at least assuming that this cadence will become a pattern. It's an important distinction. That's what I think the Switch 2 lifecycle is going to look like for Xenoblade Chronicles overall. This is all just like, we're doing this for fun. All of this is wildly subject to change. But there is one other thing, an element, you could even argue an elephant in the room. With new hardware, could they also just do versions, like upgrades, for Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, 3, and X Definitive Edition for the Switch 2 to actually utilize 60 FPS and maybe higher fidelity and resolution and stuff like that? That's the real talk of the town right now, and I think, honestly, that might be the first thing we actually end up seeing for Xenoblade Chronicles. But I've been down this road before with Bloodborne, so I want to get my hopes up. At the same time, I've been burned before, but I do think seeing 60 FPS versions at minimum for Xenoblade Chronicles at some point in the near future would make a lot of sense for the IP. I can also imagine Monolith is just swamped with doing their usual support duties for Nintendo, like working on Mario Kart World, or even working on Xenoblade Chronicles 4, which could possibly explain why we haven't seen any of these upgrades yet, at least with the launch of the Switch 2. Maybe that is to come. I would like to imagine those upgrades are coming, because I would like to replay the series, if they do, and experience these games at a halfway decent frame rate. You can also make the argument that not going to do a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Definitive Edition, especially if we get the actual upgrades for the Switch 2. Maybe they could view it to be a bit redundant, and they elect to do a spin-off instead. We don't know exactly what it is that they are thinking. And I know this next part is going to sound like massive copium, but it's also possible we eventually see the return of Xenosaga and Xenogears, maybe if those IP holders want to remember they actually have them. And I talked about it before. I think the best chance to see Xenosaga and Xenogears back again, and for those IP holders, Bandai Namco and Square Enix, for Saga and Gears respectively, to see those IPs be brought back from the dead, I think it's heavily contingent on the success and popularity of Xenoblade Chronicles as an IP. Because if it becomes popular enough, and these companies have IP that is very closely related to it, they'll probably want to cash in on it because they're a business, they want money. We saw how kind the Switch was to Xenoblade Chronicles as an IP. A series that always struggled to even break 1 million, now at least breaks it consistently with all of its releases. I view Xenoblade Chronicles to be a special IP, and as I've said before, it's my favorite IP in gaming. From top to bottom, there are no misses for me. I have my preferences, sure. There are elements that I dislike, absolutely. But the reason I talk about all this stuff so much is because at the end of it all, I care about this IP so much. I may have jumped onto the Xenoblade, I don't know, love wagon? Okay, I don't know how I feel about the term love wagon. Maybe we just forget about that one. But I started playing Xenoblade back in the day with the original version of Xenoblade Chronicles X. back in the day of 2015 or 2016, I kinda don't remember when. And I would probably fall in love with the series with too. This is a series that over its storied tenure has created some of the most memorable, engaging worlds and characters and stories and just moments in all of gaming for me. And I know for many of you as well. And if you are not familiar with Xenoblade and you want to get on the wagon, you want to see what it's all about, I would thoroughly encourage that. Because while it has its problems, the pros, the good points, the memorable points, far outweigh the issues. What an absolute crazy 15 years this game has had. What an absolute crazy 15 years of development and iteration, doing things that many people, myself included, never thought they would do. I remember when I first beat Xenoblade 2, and I wanted there to be a Xenoblade 3, but I never thought it would actually happen. Let alone, when we got Xenoblade 3, did I actually think they would connect it all, despite hoping that would be the case. Time and time again, Monolith exceed my expectations, exceed what I believe the IP is capable of doing. And whether that is going back into the past and bringing games into the, well, more modern day, and giving them the love, the attention, and the care they so rightfully deserve, or creating entire new experiences, Monolith have proven themselves to me. And they did this long ago, and they continue to prove why that faith that I have in them is so well placed. The future awaits, people, and I cannot wait to see what lies just beyond the sky for Xenoblade Chronicles in the next 15 years. So in the spirit of Xenoblade Chronicles, let's look into the future, because the future awaits. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure having the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, leave a comment down below with your experience in Xenoblade. What was your favorite moment? What was your favorite game? What are you looking forward to in the future in regards to Xenoblade? I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. Bye bye, everybody. Until we meet again!